The diner was the kind of place that carried the scent of old memories, coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, the soft hum of conversations blending with the scratchy tunes from a jukebox that hadn't changed since the 70s. It was small, unassuming, and tucked away on the edge of a quiet town. Locals knew it as Martha's Diner, a cozy spot where everyone knew each other's names and the staff knew your regular order before you even sat down. That morning, an old man sat in his usual booth near the window. His name was Frank Miller, an 81-year-old retired Marine, known around town as Pops. He was one of those men who carried dignity like a second skin. His back was straight despite the years, his hands still strong though calloused from time, and his eyes, though faded, carried the steel of a man who'd seen real battles. Every morning he came to Martha's for black coffee, scrambled eggs, and quiet company. But that morning, quiet wasn't what he got. A group of 3 young men stormed into the diner, loud and arrogant, reeking of cheap beer and bad intentions. They weren't from around town. No one recognized their faces. One of them, tall with tattoos crawling up his neck, looked around like he owned the place. They laughed, shoved a chair, and started mocking the old-fashioned decor. People looked away, uneasy, not wanting trouble. When the waitress, Lisa, politely asked them to keep it down, the tall one sneered. "We're just having fun, sweetheart. Don't get your apron in a twist." His voice carried, drawing glances from the regulars. Frank looked up from his plate, frowning slightly but staying silent. Lisa gave them a forced smile and turned away, but they weren't done. They started talking louder, laughing harder, until one of them noticed Frank. "Hey, old man," the tattooed thug said. "You look like you fought in some war or something. You one of those tough guys?" Frank looked up calmly. "I served, yeah," he said simply, taking a sip of his coffee. The thug smirked. "Yeah? And what did that get you? Sitting here alone, eating eggs in a dump like this?" The diner went silent. A few people shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Frank didn't flinch. He just said, "It got me freedom." "Yours too." The words hung in the air. The thug's smirk faded, replaced with something darker, anger mixed with humiliation. "You think you're better than me, old man?" he snapped, stepping closer to Frank's booth. "Sit down," Frank said quietly, not raising his voice, not showing fear. "You don't want to do this," but the punk wasn't listening. In a flash of rage, he slapped Frank across the face. The sound cracked through the diner like a gunshot. Lisa gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey!" but no one moved fast enough. Frank's glasses flew off, clattering to the floor. He didn't fall, didn't cry out, just slowly lifted his head, his cheek red, eyes steady. "You done?" he asked. The thug laughed, shaking his hand like it was some kind of joke. "Yeah, I'm done. Old man should learn respect." Then from behind the counter, Martha, the owner, picked up the phone. "I'm calling the cops," she said, trembling. The thugs laughed again. "Go ahead, lady. We'll be gone before they even show up." But they were wrong. At that moment, the diner door swung open and the little bell above it jingled. Every head turned. In walked a group of bikers, big, bearded, wearing leather jackets that carried the unmistakable insignia, Hell's Angels. At the front of the group was a man built like a wall, with piercing blue eyes and a familiar face. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Frank standing there, blood trickling from his lip. "Dad?" he said, voice sharp with concern. The diner froze. The thug who'd slapped Frank turned pale. "Wait, what?" he stammered. The biker walked over, his boots thudding against the floor. "Who did this?" Frank, still calm, simply said, "It's fine, son. Don't make a scene." But his son, Jake Miller, wasn't hearing that. He turned toward the thugs, his jaw tightening. The other bikers spread out silently behind him, their presence heavy and menacing. "You hit my father?" Jake asked the tattooed man, voice low and steady, the kind of voice that made your stomach drop. The thug tried to laugh it off. "Hey man, it was just a misunderstanding. We didn't—" Jake didn't let him finish. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the silverware jumped. "You put your hands on a Marine veteran, on my father, and you think that's a misunderstanding?" The thug took a step back, but the wall of bikers behind him made escape impossible. Frank finally stood up, steadying himself. "Jake, he said quietly. Don't. It's not worth it. But Jake's eyes never left the thug. You disrespected the wrong man. The diner was dead silent. Everyone knew who the Hells Angels were, feared, respected, unpredictable. The thugs didn't dare move. Jake took a slow step closer. You're gonna apologize to him. Right now! The thug swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Louder, Jake snapped. I'm sorry, sir! The thug blurted, his voice shaking. Frank just nodded slightly. That's enough, he said, but Jake wasn't finished. Now you're gonna clean up that mess you made. And then you're gonna walk out of this diner and never come back. The three men scrambled to pick up Frank's glasses and napkins that had fallen on the floor, tripping over each other in their rush to obey. When they finally ran out the door, the bikers stood watching until the sound of their car faded into the distance. Jake turned back to his father, his hard expression softening. You okay, Pops? Frank chuckled. You always did have a dramatic sense of timing. The diner broke into quiet laughter, the tension finally lifting. Martha came over with a fresh cup of coffee and shaky hands. That was something, she said. Jake nodded. Nobody touches a veteran in my presence. The bikers sat down, ordering coffee and pie like it was just another day. Frank looked around, still composed but touched. Didn't expect the cavalry today, he said to his son. Jake smiled faintly. Cavalry's always got your back, old man. The rest of the morning, the diner buzzed with whispered stories, how a veteran stood his ground, how his son and the Hells Angels showed what loyalty really looked like. But for Frank, it wasn't about revenge or fear. It was about respect, something the world seemed to be losing. Later that afternoon, a local reporter came by after hearing about the incident. Frank refused to make it a big story. I don't need headlines, he said. I just want people to remember that respect doesn't cost anything. When asked what went through his mind when he was hit, Frank paused for a moment, then said, I've been through worse. I fought for this country so people could make their own choices. But no one has the right to take away someone else's dignity. The reporter nodded, moved by his calm strength. Outside the diner, Jake leaned against his bike, watching his father talk through the window. One of his biker brothers said quietly, Your old man's tougher than all of us. Jake smiled. He always was. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the Hells Angels roared off into the distance, leaving behind the quiet diner and a story that the town would never forget. Frank sat back in his booth, watching them go, and whispered, Semper Fi. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about honor, about an old Marine who stood tall even when disrespected, and a son who showed the world what it means to protect family and legacy. Martha's diner would never be the same again. And neither would anyone who witnessed that moment. The day an old veteran reminded everyone what courage, respect, and loyalty really look like.